Hey everybody, Bobby Kling from Your Online Genius here. Wanted to come to you today and talk about an important concept that I think all entrepreneurs need to learn and need to really kind of internalize. And that is, it's really a tool on how you can avoid having to deal with me or any other lawyer. And I know I'm a nice guy. You maybe have gotten to the point that you kind of like me and kind of like my pithy responses, or maybe find me at least kind of mildly amusing. But the fact is that spending time with lawyers isn't fun. I get it. I'm a lawyer. I don't like spending time with lawyers. And so what I try to do with people that I work with, but also people in my tribe, is I try to help them avoid having to spend time with lawyers. Because I think that's the best service that I can provide to them. If I can set you up so that you don't have to spend a lot of time with lawyers, I have done my job. And I wanted to talk to you about what I view as the most important tool in your arsenal, the best way that you can go about avoiding ending up dealing with lawyers. And that is to get in the habit of building of getting your agreements in writing. And the more that you get in the habit of getting all of your important agreements in writing, the less likely you are to face someone like me or to have to spend time with someone like me down the road. Because lawyers thrive on uncertainty. They thrive when there is gray area, when there is a it depends type of situation. And when you don't have a written agreement, it's always a gray area. Because let me tell you what happens if you don't have a written agreement. If you don't have a written agreement, you end up in a position where if a dispute arises between you and whoever the other party to that agreement is, what you're going to end up with is you have a dispute and you have a memory of one thing and the other person has a different memory. And let me ask you a question. Think about it for a second. Without a written agreement, how would you decide who was right and who was wrong? If you think about it, there's no good answer. And what I'll tell you is, in the legal world, what happens is you end up in a very expensive, long-lasting legal dispute, because the only way to resolve that kind of dispute is by having, your memory and your testimony weighed against the other person's memory and their testimony. And what that means is you pretty much got to go all the way to trial before you can get a resolution. That's expensive. Hey, Denny, I'm glad you're here. But when you have to go to trial, when you have to do all of these things, it gets expensive. And you know what? Lawyers like that. Lawyers like situations where there's a lot of uncertainty, because that's where they can make their money. That's where they can spend a lot of time. And so when you have that uncertainty, you're bringing lawyers into your life. Now, you're also doing a lot of other really bad things. You're going to destroy your relationships, right? If you don't have any written agreement and a dispute comes up, what ends up happening is one side ultimately caves. And whichever side caves ends up feeling like they've been wrong, like they've been screwed over in the deal. If it's you or if it's the other side, it doesn't matter. The point is, if you cave or the other person caves, you end up with these kind of bad feelings because people feel like, hey, I got screwed in this deal. And so that's another bad consequence. Now, let's look at the other side. What happens if you actually had a written agreement? So if you had a written agreement and a dispute comes up, what do? Well, you say, let's look back and see what the agreement says. And you go back and you see what the agreement says, and it's pretty simple to figure out what the actual agreement is. You look and you say, okay, well, it says I'm going to do X and they're going to do Y. And then at that point, all you have to do is go and say, okay, well, are you doing X or are you doing Y? And that way, it's simple, it's easy. You get a quick way to resolve disputes. And there's some little clauses that you're going to want to put into these agreements. Us lawyers have written these up over time. One of them is called what's called an entire agreement clause. And it basically is this clause. You'll see it in a lot of contracts. It says, hey, this written agreement, this is the whole agreement. Nothing else matters. We don't care what we may have said before. Just look at this agreement. And the reason for doing that is that way it's easy to figure out what the agreement is. You look at the written agreement and you resolve it. Now let's talk about what that means. So if there's a clear answer, lawyers stay away. Because look, if you're wrong, you're just going to back down and give in to whoever it is on the other side. But if they're wrong, they're going to back down. So it's not going to be a problem. So you're not going to have an expensive dispute. But second of all, think about it this way. You're not going to have someone having hurt feelings, right? If you thought that it said something and you look at the agreement and it doesn't say that, well, it's like, okay, well, I was wrong. But you're not going to feel like you got screwed over in the deal. So that's the other advantage. It's good for your relationships. So my best piece of advice that I can give anybody is get your agreements in writing. If you get in the habit of getting all of your important agreements in writing, you will be leaps and bounds ahead of most other online entrepreneurs. Because most online entrepreneurs rely upon handshake deals. And handshake deals are great. And it's hilarious. What I'll tell you is I often hear this from people, something along these lines. They're like, well, I haven't done it yet, but I'm only dealing with my friends right now. And when I hear that, I say, that's the most important time to get an agreement. Because a dispute with your friend, that's horrible because that's going to ruin not just your business relationship, but also your friendship. So again, the advice I would give you is get every contract, every agreement in writing, and especially with friends, especially with family, especially with anyone where there's something beyond a normal business relationship, because those are the places where, quite honestly, you can least afford to end up with a dispute. So again, my takeaway for today, my call to action to you today is go out and get your agreements in writing. If all you can do is just write it down yourself between you and the other party, that's fine. That's better than nothing. I'm a big proponent of don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So start taking action. If that means you start and you do some false starts and maybe they're not perfect, fine. But at least you have something. But start writing down your agreements and get in the habit of writing them down in as much detail as possible. Because again, remember the point is to get it so there's not a lot of gray area, not a lot of uncertainty. So just write it down. You may not get all of the legalese perfect. That's okay. As long as you have the actual written agreement, what you've agreed to in writing, and you have it specific, you will be way ahead of your competition. So that's my call to action today, is start getting your agreements in writing and just get in the habit of doing that. That's it for now. I'll see you again later this week.